This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Dialogue 2-session special Agenda for Progress. With the global economy still facing serious challenges from COVID-19 pandemic, China is aiming to achieve a higher than 6% growth. How feasible is that, and what gives planners the confidence that they can reach the goal, and what are the aims for China's development layout at the 14th Five-Year Plan, and how will China continue to try to tackle challenges at home and abroad? To talk about those issues, I'm joined here in the studio by Mr. Wang Huiyao. He's the president of the Center for China and Globalization and also a counselor for China State Council. And Jörg Whittaker, president of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China. That's our topic. I'm Zhou Yue. Let me start with you, Mr. Wang. In the work report by Premier Li, he set out the target of over 6%, at least 6% for 2021. You have to put it into context. When the rest of the world is facing recession and even probably depression, China is promising 6% growth. Is it first realistic, and is it too low a target for China? Because some say it's going to be a stronger recovery.
I think, first of all, we have to reflect what has happened last year. Last year, NPC Premier League's report didn't give any number of the GDP growth. But as a matter of fact, we managed a 2% growth last year, above 2%. But actually, this year, I think traditionally NPC is a section that you really rally the confidence and then give the plan. And actually, that's where all the good practice has been for years. So I think this year, even given the pandemic still very live in many other countries, I think Chinese leadership has realized that China has maybe a mechanism to contain the virus and keep the economy growing. So I think that 6% is realistic, and I'm sure probably going to be higher than that. For example, we actually had an event with World Bank. And the World Bank Vice President told me that they project China going to have a 7.9% this year. So I think between 6 and 8 probably is the target that China is going to have, or even higher, depends on the virus situation continues. But I think this is an enormous message China sent. That China is going to achieve a 6% GDP growth. That is going to be a big confidence boost. That's really going to be anchor for the world economy and also contribute to the world economic growth. And then I think that is really something like a strong signal that China is sending to both China and world.
And Jörg, about the uncertainty here, because obviously there's a caution in China's prediction. Which is more relevant? Is it the COVID, or is it the uncertain outside world?
I guess COVID doesn't really play that much of a role here anymore in China. I think it's the external development which actually creates a lot of uncertainties. The tech wars, the trade wars, the financial decoupling that some are aiming at. So I guess these are the external factors that China has to deal with. Just briefly to the 6%, I guess that the Prime Minister has very smartly taken a very low target because there's a very, very low base from last year. And I'm sure that China will sail easily past 8%. By setting at 6%, I think his message is to all the governors, to everyone across China, go for qualitative growth, don't stretch yourself and go for quantity, because that used to be the problem.
Don't push the local governments for qualitative growth.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
About what is driving the growth? The 3 parts: consumption, investment, and export. What do you think might be the biggest contributor to this year's growth, Mr. Wang?
Well, I would say the consumption probably will be very active. Now, the consumer spending now in China is almost equal or even larger than the U.S. now. And also with the digital economy is happening so fast with this pandemic, which account 38% of Chinese GDP now. And so I think now with the 800 million people lifted out of poverty, 400 million middle class, now we'll see probably people, when they have a certainty, they would like to spend. We're probably going to see travel revive a little bit because we have Summer Olympic and then Winter Olympic. China's geared up for that. And also we will see domestic tourism probably going to have a bit. So I think that all those domestic consumption will happen. But what's more than that, I think the international demanding probably is still there because a lot of countries still locked down or just recover from lockdown. Production hasn't picked up yet. They still need the suppliers from China. I think China will probably do that as well. As far as the investment, China not as investment as stimulate that package as the US does. But I think the infrastructure is still going to, how many fast track railway going to be built and things like that will continue to drive China's economic growth.
Talking about the potential for consumption, probably you are looking for a higher rate of consumption in China's economy. But to get there from 38% probably to even 50, 60%, what is lacking there?
Well, if you look into China's share of global GDP, it's 16%, and China's share in global consumption, it's 12%. So China is clearly under-consuming. So I guess there has to be a real shift from investment. China has possibly overinvested, has the best infrastructure in the world in many areas, to actually give a bit more room to the consumer, increase social security areas, make the hukou a little bit flexible so people can move better, make more insurance. People want to feel safe and then they spend. And on top of it, rightfully, Henry said that it's 400 million people that are in the middle class, but as Prime Minister Li Keqiang says, 600 million people are still living below 240 euro a month. Huge potential.
But there's the question where the money come from, because the country is now aiming for a stable deficit rate around 3.5%. It isn't planning to implement strong stimulation, no injection of much liquidity into the market. But while the rest of the world, in Europe, in America, well, the central banks are printing money, basically. Why China don't keep up?
Well, I think that there's probably 2 or 3 factors. The first, I see that China actually after this pandemic, the synergy is really kicking in together now. You have the 2/3 of the global fast train network. You have the largest highway network. You have the almost 1 million 5G stations now on top of 4.6 4G stations throughout the country. You have 1 billion smartphone users. Everybody, like, they have ERP. The great efficiency and productivity has greatly enhanced. And also you have this online communication so constantly, WeChat, whatever. So that has actually produced a lot of efficiency and effectiveness. So I think even with what I see in the previous report is that they actually still continue to cut tax for individual and SME. So that is great stimulus. So people now feel safe, as you said, people will like to invest more. So the private, the society, the private sector still have a lot of room to contribute to invest. But on top of that, we're going to see RCEP going to be ratified this year. We're probably going to see CAI, China-EU investment treaty going through. We're probably going to see this all the trade between China, ASEAN, China, EU, now all the both the largest trading partners. We'll have more demand on the trade side. More investors come in. China now become such an attractive place for all the money from international comes in to invest. So all those will probably keep China going.
And you're a very shrewd businessman. In which area do you think investors are looking at with strong interest here in China?
Well, let me add on to Henry. First of all, China actually was wise not to overdo it in the packaging last year. There was no need for it. China had a very strong export because China had the perfect product mix for nations in lockdown. Electronics, had medical equipment and so forth. So in a way there was really no need, and luckily the government didn't throw money at any problem that came up with. So actually China has a very little exposure. Now the US is spending big time, Europe spends big time.
Yep.
huge benefit for China, again, to have these economies coming back as markets and so forth. But again, for us in business, European business, we of course look at China and we look at investment. And I think the biggest allure comes from the pledge of carbon-free China by 2060. The kind of massive change going away from hydrocarbon to renewables in unprecedented numbers, 660 gigawatt of power station, coal-fired power station has to go offline. That's where the business is going to be.
That's another very grand, ambitious project for China. We will go carbon neutral by the year 2060. That means it will be a total revamp of a lot of industries, construction, automobile, and energy production. But where's the main obstacle right now? Because obviously this is very ambitious, but can technology fill in the gap right away, and at what speed?
I think it probably come at the right time, the premier cost for that. And the green economy is going to take on hold. I think that President Xi has actually pledged at the UN summit that China going to achieve carbon neutral before 2060, not by, but before by 2060, which is, I think that...
many people wonder how.
Yeah, but now it's already, that's actually the clock is kicking, it's counting down. It's counting down now, So China now is now become the biggest clean energy automobile market.
Okay.
Tesla, because of that, is almost become the largest company in the world.
And also Chinese own, domestic.
That's right. And then you have a solar panel. China is already the biggest. And then you have the wind power. China is also the biggest. So all those things coming, and also energy, saving buildings, all kind of, anywhere, every aspect, every project, there's all energy savings on that, and efficiency on that, and less emission and reduced carbon. And also, as Yoger said, so many thermal plants going to be probably phased out, and then what's going to be the new opportunities. So I think China probably is leading that with the U.S. now. President Biden is such a strong commitment on that. They're going to have Earth Summit on that. So I think that timing internationally is good. China is already taking lead on all those fronts, and I think we can work out internationally with other countries.
Can you tell us which party occupied which space in this project? For example, what is advantage for China? What is it for Europeans and Americans?
On the energy side?
On the renewable energy side.
Renewable. Well, first of all, of course, China has been developing solar wind, actually with foreign technologies turned it into a super world record export. There will be now a bit of a plateau, but there has to be a lot of things done in grids, in energy, insulation materials. There has to be better housing insulation, because China is wasting also a lot of money, a lot of heat and cold. So there will be a lot of technology gains that possibly we don't even know where it's going to be. It's going to be depending on digital development. And already now China employs 4 million people in so-called green technologies. Europe, that used to be the front runner, is 1.2 million. The US is 700,000. So I guess the leadership has realized that actually a very ambitious carbon neutral target is a job creation model.
I'm sure that the green energy development is part of China's 14th five-year plan. And apart from clean energy and climate-related projects, what are the other priorities in that plan?
Well, I think now China actually, for the 13th five-year plan, China achieved a lot. I think, but more on the elevating poverty, hardware building, roads, bridges, and that. But 14th five-year plan, I think there will be more software to be really upgraded, like education, social security, Medicare, and all those digital economy and
social safety net.
Social safety net, and so that is actually going to really raise many people into the middle class. So I think that is, for example, China has 1 billion people social security covered. There's still 400 million to be covered. So those are, I think, the new area that a lot of new business coming on. Also, China encouraging to have more babies now. The education, probably a lot of schools used to be closed, maybe looking for enlarge. So I think there's a lot. But I'm still quite optimistic about this dual circulation, that the international circulation on China, the dependence on China and China's dependence on the world will continue with all those new agreement comes in. Plus, China also pledged to join CPTPP. So I think if all those WTO, now we have a new head, have all those things in place, we'll see a trade and investment return to a higher level so that can carry China and the world all together and in the 14th FiveYear Plan.
Do you share Mr. Wang's optimism that trade and investment will turn as pre-COVID time?
We hope.
Well, hope dies last.
Because there was a big uncertainty that is America.
Yeah, I mean, what you learn in China is to be optimistic. You know, I've been here more than 30 years, but at the same time, the headwinds are enormous. The fact that the US has basically labeled China a security threat already narrows the space in order to engage China to the point where it used to be. Also, Europe has issues. There's a constant discussion on human rights, which is throwing back stones at the Europe-China relationship, and that will not go away easily. So I guess that you have to find common grounds. That's biodiversity, that's climate change. You have to sort of find trust again, rebuild the WTO, and not sort of waste too much time on the thorny issues.
Mr. Wang, what do you think China can do and can say to convince our Western partners that China is a force for good? It is to serving the rest of the world, not a threat.
Well, I think that certainly there's room to enhance on our narratives, on our communications. For example, China has done very well on the KPI. I mean, unbelievable. You know, GDP started from 700 trillion to 100 trillion now, and
but people can interpret that as a threat,
yeah,
rather than
exactly.
A
So
news.
if China can contribute 30% of global GDP growth, pandemic year even 50%, if China can become a large trading partner with 130 nations, how can we not telling the story right? But also you have to. I think I agree with Jörg that it takes two to tango, and then really. I think that we should continue to be more open, have a more communication, but also in the private sectors, people-to-people exchanges, and also we should welcome people come to visit Xinjiang and also have more dialogues and communication, and also we should resume the journalist between China and Western countries too. So I think attract more foreign students to China. And have more dialogues between private sector think tanks, and welcome more foreign business.
And
China.
do you think Biden is going that way?
Well, actually, Biden, I think, surprised me. He's quite a bit different than President Trump. For example, he actually had a telephone call with President Xi on the eve of Chinese New Year, saying Happy New Year to
That's
all
a
Chinese.
goodwill gesture.
That's a very good gesture. And then he actually, one of the orders he signed is to ban any language use referring virus to any ethnic or nationality. So China virus was not something he's promoting. But we haven't seen any daily sanctions like Pompeo in the last few months. So he's basically he also not using rivalry. At the Munich Security Conference, he's using strategic competitor, not as rivalry.
There is a caveat. Do Chinese appreciate the fact that Biden is actually living in a dilemma? On one hand, probably he knows he needs to work with China, but on the other hand, politically, that doesn't sell very well in America. It's going to cost him politically. What's going to be his choice?
I think it's gradually working on that, and then we're not seeing more think tank exchanges, but also more on that. He has more established team, very knowledgeable on China. All those people. So I'm sure it will not going to take a day to change the attitude, but gradually I think he's going to be more pragmatic, realistic. For example, he's probably inviting China to join his Earth Summit on climate change. So I hope that we can find many common ground fighting pandemic. He pledged $2 billion now. After President Xi pledged $2 billion in fighting COVID-19. That's so different with Trump. So he's giving a lot of good gestures.
There is an important front that we need to talk about. That's tech, especially those high tech, artificial intelligence, robotics, and biomedicine. Those industries actually involve a long value chain that's spread all over the world. It's inconceivable that China will be left out of it. But it seems America is now conceiving a China-free tech world. How likely is that?
Well, I think I just want to add before Joe comes in. I think that American business are fed up. The U.S. General Chamber of Commerce just released a report. The trade with China will cost U.S. 1% GDP and 700,000 jobs. We see also the Congress, the company, many companies saying, okay, for the Trump congressmen in Trump supported Trump, they're going to cut down their donations. So I'm sure the business will felt that if this continued, they're going to lose business. Boeing will be out of China, semiconductor will lose hugely, and all the other companies will lose. So that pressure will come back. I mean, no administration can continue to use the populism to really sustain the country's growth. So we have to change.
That's always been the Chinese thinking. The business will talk in America finally. But is it still working?
I mean, the decoupling it is frankly impossible. The supply chains are so interwoven. You can possibly do something on software. You can again hold back semiconductors. It will have an impact on the other side. But I guess really there has to be a mechanism that also China has to open up its market. Also, China has this kind of only China software and only China equipment, secure and controllable they call it. So again, it takes two to tango.
But people say that's a response to what happened to America. We must be self-reliant, otherwise we'll be cut off out of the world.
Well, secure and controllable was before Trump already. So there is again, it's a build-up of things, and I fully agree with Henry. There has to be baby steps of rebuilding trust. We cannot expect our leaders to sit in a situation where public opinion is really negative in order to roll this back. It has to be building trust and open up the telephone market, open up, don't insist on software being purely Chinese or purely American. Helps. For us Europeans, we don't want these two giants to fight.
Okay, maybe you don't want the two giants to fight, but the two giants will fight in some way, because to claim the high ground in tech and economy will be a very competitive thing. For example, China will double down on R&D investment. We heard that continued tax cuts on business R&D costs will be a key priority. The report said China will grant an extra tax deduction of 75% on enterprises' research and development, and raise this to 100% to manufacturing enterprises. So we must be ready for a technology strangling from the US. We must develop more home-grown technologies. But the problem is that will be very expensive and time-consuming. What is the right way to do it?
Well, I think, first of all, I think we probably, people shouldn't interpret too much about China upgrades technology, because the Chinese GDP has gone up, the society has gone up, the demand for technology has gone up. So China has to have some capacity to do that. But on the other hand, I think David Ricardo's
comparative
advantage is still there. If some area the U.S. does the best, let them do it.
But that has been cut off by politics in some countries.
But I think that is the trend. That's a deglobalization. But I think we have to turn that around a little bit, because gradually, of course, I agree with you that has to start from somewhere, so that China can do that. But for example, if Boeing is not going to sell China, Airbus is not going to sell China, China going to reinvent all the wheels, start again. It probably going to cost more.
Like China already produces its own jet.
That's right.
C919.
Certainly we do.
Will that become prevalent in other areas and industries, that the rest of the world will be relatively distant from the Chinese?
I still think competitive advantage, in some countries does well, maybe better than others. But for example, innovation is always U.S. I mean, it's probably has more advantage. But then the synergy, the efficiency, the one 5-year plan after another 5-year plan, China is the best. So you can't say who is always going to be dominant. But I think in many areas, China will be certainly different. You can't just look at China with a 20 years view or Soviet Union style or whatever. China has actually come up. We have to really take a new look on China. But that's also a challenge for China to really explain well. For example, like SOE played a huge role in elevating poverty, right? But then, we need that. So I think China is a hybrid economy with the right combination, 70% private sector.
And you believe that it will continue to be so, a hybrid economy?
Hybrid, yeah, because that works well for China. 15% of multinational, another 20% SOE, which makes perfect ingredient for Chinese economy. And that should be more spoken about and standard.
Another thing is diversification. China definitely wants that. We want to have better trade relationship with ASEAN, with Europe. We just signed a bilateral investment treaty. But how effective can going different directions will be?
Well, of course, it makes sense to diversify, but I guess that China has a huge domestic economy. I think it really has to first and foremost put all the efforts in order to break down the domestic barriers. China has 31 provinces or cities. It's like a European Union, but with a lot of hurdles. China has huge GDP potential within China in breaking it down, and China should actually sort of open up more in order to get foreign business to compete, because research and development doesn't come only from throwing money at labs. So it comes from customers demanding better products. That has been China's strength over the last years, and that should be maintained, and not by turning around away from the global economy, but opening up the door for more competition. Competition drives innovation.
Let's talk about the biggest caveat in all of this, that's COVID. Vaccination is now accelerating major economies in China and neighboring economies, but whether it will work the same way in the US, in Europe, that's a question mark. What is your sense?
Well, clearly China virtually has no COVID since May last year, and has proven that a lockdown and all the kind of checks have led to this situation. The vaccination actually in China started surprisingly slow, possibly because China doesn't have a threat and doesn't have a problem, so people are not really enticed in order to go
and there
get
was
a
also
shot.
production capacity problem.
Capacity also, but I think it's also attitude problems there. The US has surprisingly come back roaring like a phoenix out of the ashes with a miserable handling of COVID, and having now an extremely good injection rate. Europe has been sort of in between, and the vaccination rollout has been a disaster. So I guess that the US will open up first, the US market will come back. China has to face the fact that actually the US will be possibly the first partner to have open travel again. Europe will take much longer, I guess.
So do you believe, Mr. Wang, China can play a bigger role in helping vaccinations in other countries and areas? Because, well, China is relatively safe in terms of COVID threat, but we can produce vaccines.
Oh, absolutely. I think, even though the U.S. has, President Biden said, 100 days for 100 million people, U.S. already injected 50 million, whatever.
Yeah.
China injected 50 million, but China has 1.4 billion,
Yeah.
So what I can see is China is doing this great. And already they are, aid about 50 countries and export another 20 some countries. But this is great. This is great responsibility China can demonstrate to the world. Only every country is safe, developing country is safe, can the world finally safe.
Otherwise, we can't open the border.
That's right. We cannot open that. So I think this attitude is okay. But I think also China should catch up, inject the local people too, because for example, age between 60 and below 18 are not really folks getting
But
injected.
currently, they still lack data in that area.
So I hope that we can catch up as well. But that's where also China's efficiency, effectiveness can be demonstrated again, to really carry the world through this together with other countries, EU, US, and then we can have a safer world ahead.
In one sentence, do you think 2021 will be better than 2020 or not?
Absolutely. I think 2021 will be much better than 2020.
Well, it's a very bad benchmark. 2020 was miserable. 2021 certainly will be much better.
All right. Thank you very much, Yorick, and thank you, Mr. Wang. And you've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Zhou in Beijing. This is the special program Agenda for Progress on China's political season. Goodbye.